So you want to learn logo design, but the problem is most courses, they just show you how to use software. They don't show you the rest of the process, the stuff that you really need to know. So in this course, you'll see me take a real logo design brief from a client on Skype. Then I'll show you how to come up with initial ideas. Then we'll break down the idea of sketching out ideas, but I'll break it up into steps so you'll come up with more ideas than you really thought possible. Then we'll cover little things like colour and fonts, and we'll go through the basics of Adobe Illustrator before we start working up the ideas. You'll get to see me getting feedback from the client on my ideas, and I'll show you how to go about making amends and how to finalise your ideas. And if you want to make money from your logo designs, I'll show you how to quote for a project, and I'll also include a sample quote and a sample invoice to get you started. In the following video, you're going to see me taking a logo design brief from Brian. Now I do this by having a series of questions, and they're usually a fairly standard series of questions, and they'll include things like what does your company do, what sort of logos do you like, and also sort of what other companies give the sort of right sort of feel, what other company logos give the right sort of feel for what you're looking for. It's quite a long video, so I've also included along with it a download of the questionnaire and also a brief outline of the sort of answers that Brian gave. So if you want to skip over some of it, you're quite welcome to. Hi Brian, thank you for agreeing to help me out with the logo project. I wonder if you'd mind telling me a little bit about the company name that you want to use on the logo design.
Sure. So actually, this is quite interesting because what I originally wanted to go with, Tara, was the name Business Improvement Network. But then shortly after that, I then realized that this name already exists and there is a website with that particular domain. So I've had to quickly shelve that. But fortunately, I've come up with something that is equally good in terms of describing what I want to do. So I'm going to call this the Continuous Improvement Network.
Let me just jot that down.
Yeah.
Network. Okay, and are you going to have a strap line or anything that goes with that?
Yeah, I'm currently interested because the whole idea of this is like crowdsourcing of business improvement ideas through a community. So the strap line that I'd like to use is crowdsourced continuous improvement.
And is that going to sit with the logo? Is it always going to sit with the logo, or is that going to be separate?
That's a good question. I would like the flexibility to switch it on and off as seen fit.
Okay, so perhaps you can tell me a little bit. You just mentioned it's going to be crowdsourcing business improvement. Can you just explain a little bit about that?
Sure. So the Continuous Improvement Network is a community, an online community of business professionals who are all working in fields or doing projects that relate to business improvement. So in essence, what it is this is a platform where these professionals get together and share ideas, discuss case studies, and ask any questions that they may have relating to the business improvement techniques and methodologies. And the way that is done is through a collaborative kind of platform, which is online.
So the collaboration, is that going to be with the other? I take it they're almost like business coaches. Would you call them?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would call them business coaches. So this would be like a community of business coaches who bounce ideas off each other.
Right. So the other people who are inputting ideas are also business coaches. You're not putting it out to the public. It's just the actual people within that community.
Exactly. It's an exclusive community for business coaches. That's a good way to put it. Yes.
Okay. So can you give me some words that would describe like the qualities of the company? I mean, I put as examples like, friendly, reliable, quick, exclusive. I mean, you mentioned exclusive, so.
Exactly. Exclusive, collaborative. I don't know if that will fit. Yeah. Social. It's quick. I think is very relevant because this is the whole essence of it. It's getting speedy and timely responses to answers. I mean, to questions and to ideas. So
Can I just go
those will be
back?
some of them.
Can I just go back on something? We were talking about collaboration. Is it almost going to be like a forum type?
It's it's very similar to a
Yeah.
forum type, yeah. But this is it's more of an enhanced forum in that forums typically, only allow you to maybe input your content in the form of text predominantly, whereas this particular platform that we will use for this business is it allows all forms of content, so you can um, collaborate and share content that is in video format, in audio format, a presentation, an Excel sheet, or a Word document. It really doesn't matter. And it's all available in real time. It's all available online as long as you are logged in. So you could use your PC, your laptop, or your iPad or iPhone. As long as you're web enabled, you can access the information.
Okay. So, who are your competitors in the area at the moment?
It's a very good question. We kind of look at ourselves as it's a niche area, niche product, but competitors would be the one that I mentioned initially, which is Business Improvement Network. They have something similar to that, but also other competitors who are offering free advice on the internet would be places like Wikipedia. Could be something that we're competing with if they are sharing the same kind of topics that we are also discussing. But we would then look at our USP as that we are more exclusive, and as such we're able to share a lot more details which may not necessarily make their way into public spaces.
So, when you say you're more exclusive, are you going to limit the numbers within there at any one time?
It's not so much limiting by the number, it's more limiting by the kind of prerequisite and credentials
Right.
before you are allowed to contribute. You can join the community at different levels, but to be able to author and comment on topics, there's certain prerequisite criteria you have to have fulfilled.
What sort of look and feel is required? Is it contemporary, traditional, minimal, corporate?
Yeah, what I really wanted is something that is minimalist and professional, so not too busy. Just something that is easy on the eyes as well.
Okay, so keep it simple.
Keep it simple. That exactly, minimalist kind of style.
Sure. So, can you compare it to any other personality of any other companies? Probably throw
I
you
would
here.
say, yeah, well, in terms of the simplicity that I kind of like, although this one is just an example purely on the logo that they have, is the business called PayPal. I just
Oh
like
yeah.
the simplicity of that. It's just, pay, I think, is in a slightly different shade of blue to the PAL, and that's basically it. There's no other. I really like that one. There's one I particularly like as well. It's called Exploring Social Media. This is a community very similar to the one that we're putting together as well. So they've just got another, very simplistic look and feel to their network.
Okay, I'll look that one up.
Sure.
So, do you have any definite ideas about the logo design? And I'm going to come back to this one again. Any examples of logo design you like or dislike?
So, firstly, ideas. I do have some ideas that I was just hoping to explore a little bit further. The first one is because of what we are setting up. This is basically a community or a network. I would like that, if possible, to be illustrated as part and parcel of the image or the logo itself. So some kind of networking or connecting people together. The other one that I would also want to have featured is the fact that we are a community or a network about improvement. So demonstration of something that is showing an improvement, whether these are incremental steps or an arrow going up or something like that. But those are the two ideas I really think would capture, in essence, what we're all about. Yeah, an improvement network of professionals.
So, do you have any examples? I mean, you mentioned PayPal before.
Yeah,
Do you have any
PayPal.
other examples of logos that you like or dislike?
Yeah, so PayPal is a good one that I like. There is also another one that is quite. I like it for the fact that they just use two colors on it, and it's kind of like memorable as well. It's from a website called Bolt. So it's actually bo.lt, and that's basically their full name. I like the simplicity of the logo. It looks like you definitely see the bolt, or lightning bolt, but they use like the head of an elephant as like their logo, and that's kind of very memorable. You remember it all the time, and everywhere you see it, you kind of associate it. This is definitely bold. This is bold. So I like that one quite a lot. Just trying to think. I also like, there's a website called it's a job board website. It's called Monster.
Oh yeah.
Monster dot. Yeah, I like the font that they use there. It's just it's just so characteristic, that font. It's just one color. I think it's a purple that they use. I like the simplicity of that one. Just trying to think of another example. Yeah, so I think those three, yeah, the PayPal, the Bolt, and the last one I just mentioned,
The monster.
the
Yeah.
Monster. Sorry, yeah, the Monster. Those three kind of jump at me. I like them. And another one, by the way, which is I see it every day because I use it every day, is Skype.
Oh yeah.
I like their logo.
Yeah.
I like their logo. It's memorable. It's even what I like about the Skype one is, even if they just use the S part of it, you can still recognize that it's Skype.
Yeah.
They either use the S in their little bubble or something like that. You can see straight away that it's Skype, and I like that immediate association with that brand.
So, have you got any specific color preferences?
Well, yeah, that's a that's a bit of a tough one. So, I ideally I wanted to stick with a two-color scheme. This could be two shades of the same color, and I've explored a couple of colors which I felt I want to see how they look and feel. One of them is kind of like a new color you see with a few Web 2.0 properties. It's kind of like a green, a lime green, or trying to give you a good example of that one. But it's like a greenish, a green shade to it, and then it's normally used with black and green. I also looked at black and kind of like an orange. Those two.
Okay.
Want to see how those would feel. But to be honest, I'm still pretty open to see combinations that will either just jump at me and
Yeah.
and yeah. So
Sure.
there's really no that door is still very wide open, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who is your target audience? Now, you mentioned that they're business coaches.
Yeah.
Is there an age? Is there a typical gender or anything for these people?
Yeah,
Men.
that's a good question. Yeah, it's actually interesting because I did a survey with the kind of target audience that I'm targeting for this, and what happened is I sent out a survey which was asking for levels of interest and levels of commitment, and that was very important to find out whether this is going to be a flyer or not. And the information I got back was very interesting. Before I sent it out, I imagined that it would be predominantly male who would be more interested, but the results were actually the opposite.
Oh, really?
So actually, yes, they were. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. So I found more women were more interested in taking it up by almost a 60-40 ratio. So that was an interesting
Yeah.
shock, if you like.
Yeah.
I like you as well. I also imagined it would be male predominantly,
Yeah.
but I mean the survey results indicate that. Although it was quite a small sample, but it's still, I think, reflective. So either going with that 60-40 or even a 50-50. So I think it's going to be quite gender neutral,
Yeah.
to be honest. Yeah.
Is there an age or anything of a general age?
Yeah, so again, that's a good good question. So typically, if you look at the kind of business improvement professionals who are out there in their careers, these are people who have gone beyond a graduate scheme. So they are kind of like 5 years post their um, first degree or first 5 years of work, and then they get into this kind of role. So typically you're looking from the late 20s, 28, 29s, going all the way through to the mid 50s. That's kind of like the range, with a lot of them being maybe in the middle of that range. So from,
Okay.
yeah, in the 40s range, that kind of typifies the age group.
So I didn't put this in my questionnaire, so I might stump you here, but do you know what sort of, are there any mainstream magazines or business magazines that these people would be likely to read?
Yeah, it's a very good question. There are some business, definitely business magazines that are relating to this field, and the two I can quote that we tend to read a lot is The Economist and the FT.
Okay.
So those two are kind of like generic, but there are also industry specific. Let's say some of them are online materials, blogs. I'll have to look them up. I can send you
That'd be great,
short
yeah.
list. Yeah, okay.
It
I'll just
just
send
gives
you a
me an
short.
idea for the feel of the type of graphics that might appeal to these people.
Oh yeah, exactly. Um, the very good one is actually where I get a lot of my traffic from. It's called the Management Help Library, managementhelp.com. I think that's what it is.
Management
It's a
help.
yeah, Management Help.
Great.
It's a very popular source of free management resources, and a lot of my traffic come from that one. So that's a very good example.
Okay.
And I
Fantastic.
think I like their logo as well.
I'll add that to the list then. Great.
Yeah.
Now, I think I mentioned this before, so we're going to go for a two-colour logo. Just looking at my list of questions.
Yeah.
So, how will the logo be used? I know obviously it's going to be used on the website you're setting up. Is it going to be printed as well, or is it going to just be totally online?
It's going to be predominantly online, and predominantly on the website itself. But we also want to use elements of that logo, or even in its entirety, for our social media uh, icons, if you like.
Oh,
So
okay.
the YouTube channel, the Facebook page, and the Twitter um, images should relate to the logo. Just to use the Skype example, it could be just we use the S part of it, or we
Yeah,
use an
got you.
acronym.
An
Yeah,
element, or even an icon if we produce an icon in base. Excuse
exactly.
me.
That's right. I see.
Um, any other information you would like to add?
So I think, yeah, I think it goes without saying that what we're really looking for is something that is going to stand the test of time, as it were. Really, something that when we start using that logo, we want to immediately be associated with um, networking. We want to be associated with improvement in business, and we want to come across as a bunch of professionals who are serious about what they do and who are passionate about making improvements in business.
Great, thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
So just as you did when you were trying to collect together all the logos, this time go and have a look and see if you can find similar business related websites and go onto them and have a look, see if they've got any nice imagery, any good logos, any nice typography, and just take screenshots of all those little bits too. Now collect them all together and you can put them in a folder and perhaps drop them into iPhoto. What I quite like to do is actually create a mood board where I actually paste it all up in a layout program and then I print it out. What you can also do is create a physical mood board by getting a large sheet of paper, and then I'll collect together a stack of magazines on a similar related subject. So in this case, Brian mentioned that his audience read The Economist, so that was one of the magazines I picked. Then just tear up any nice graphics, anything that catches your eye really from the magazines, and paste them all up onto a large sheet of paper. So once you've got the brief from the client, the next thing to do is start collecting together some of the imagery that they mentioned. So let's take a look. Now the first website was Business Improvement Network, so I'd just take a screenshot of that logo there. Now you can do that on a Mac by going Command, Shift and 4, and on a PC you should have a button on your keyboard called Print Screen. Then go into the next one, which was Exploring Social Media. Again, do exactly the same thing and do a screenshot there. Same thing with PayPal. Exactly the same thing with Bolt and with Monster. And then you could also, if you wanted, have a look for some of your own websites, well, ones that you think are related. We'll do this more later, but I found a few such as Smarter, BNI, and I just did exactly the same thing. I did a screenshot there as well. Now once you've got all those images, you can put those in a folder and then drag them over into iPhoto. And to create a new album in iPhoto, you just go File, New Album, and just basically grab all those images and drag them over. And the only reason we're doing this really is so we can see everything in one place. Now if you're on a PC, I think there's Google Picasa, which I think is free. Just go to Google and search for that, Google Picasa. Or there's, I think, Windows Media Explorer. So the next thing we need to do is create a mind map, and we can do this by putting the three words, continuous improvement and network, in the middle of a sheet of paper. And then we start off by looking for words that might link to those three words. So let's take the word improvement, and that might make us think of a chart. Perhaps in turn that might make us think of a gauge. Maybe that might make us think of an empty or a full petrol tank. And you can see that you can gradually build up a large network of associated words. Now make sure at this stage you don't censor yourself. So even if you have an idea and it's a little bit bizarre, or if it's a little bit sort of off the sort of subject, don't worry about it. And gradually you should be able to fill the page up. And once you fill the page up with words, you might also want to start adding doodles and little pictures, because these you might actually be able to see visual relationships rather than just relating words. So something that you see on there might look like something else. Now all these ideas we should be able to use later. We should be able to pick out different ones and use those within our logo designs. In this section we're going to cover sketching out logo ideas. Now I use an A3 layout pad and a fine line pen for doing this, but you can use any paper you've got. The only reason I use layout really is because it's semi-transparent, so if you do something that you quite like, just want to refine it a little bit or change it, you can just put another sheet of paper over the top and trace it off. I always start sketching before I go onto the computer, because I think it helps you work your ideas out first, and I'd recommend that you do the same. And in this section we're going to cover some different ways that you can try and generate ideas for your logo design. So now we're going to take a look at how you could create a simple symbol based logo. But before we move on to the actual logo project, let's try a really simple exercise where we take an image. In this case I've got the picture of a hanging basket, and see how many different ways you can actually simplify that to make an icon or a symbol. So first we might start off and look and think, how can we make that plant bit at the top, how can we simplify that and make some sort of shape? So maybe for the first option I'd do some sort of squiggly line for the plant top, and then underneath it's got like a wiry hanging basket, so perhaps I could make 3 sections that represented that. And maybe I'd exaggerate the chains and make them 2 simple slopey lines with a little circle on the top. So perhaps try another one. Maybe this time the hanging basket piece could be a simple semicircle. Make some scrolls for the plant piece, and then 2 simple straight lines with a circle for the chain and the loop at the top. You can carry this on. So next one, perhaps the plant could be separate little leaves, a sort of split semicircle so it's not complete, almost like a line, and then this time perhaps 3 lines represent the chain at the top and a loop. So what I suggest you do is either use the image I've used, or pick an image of your own choice, whether it's one you have at home or one that you find online, and see how many different ways you can sketch taking that the image, simplify it, and how you can make different symbols from it. So to create a symbol, we're going to do exactly the same thing that we did before and combine some of the ideas we had on the mind map with the mood boards and see what we can come up with. So you may want to, as you go along, you may want to look for reference images, and you can just do that by doing a Google search on the Google Images. So I started off with the idea of the group and combined that with one of the ideas of the chain link that I had on my mind map. So I came up with this sort of symbol. The idea of mingling the people with the chain. But you could obviously come up with all sorts of things. I came up with another one here, which was like this 3D, more of a 3D type of symbol of a group. But you could also do a circle image of people. You might find another way that you could represent people. So once you've exhausted all the ideas from one thing that you had on your mind map, take another. So in this case, I took the idea of the arrow. So I tried, could I use the arrow to be part of a person, which I've shown here. Could I make the arrow and a person combined so that the person standing is actually the stick part of the arrow? Could an arrow show improvement by being the shadow of a sort of a blocky symbol person? Now I'm not sure if all these work, and at this stage it doesn't really matter if they do or not, because you're just throwing ideas out there. You're sketching quickly, you're not censoring yourself, and just trying to come up with as many ideas as possible. Another thing we can try doing is using the initials of the company name. Now what we can try doing is combining those letters in different ways. That's one option. We can also look at using those letters along with little pictorial elements. So let's take a look at a few examples. Okay, here you can see where I've again used my mood board and my mind map and taken the idea of the chain, and I've tried to link the letters C, I and N in an unusual way. So it's like a chain link, but it's also the three letters combined. I've done a similar thing here where I've combined the C and the I and then the N, but then I've also combined them in a pictorial element of like a little speech bubble. If we look at this example here, I've taken the three initial letters, but then in the middle I've made the I a little bar graph. So what I suggest you try now is to take the initial letters of the company name and try and see as many different ways that you can combine those letters to create interesting shapes. Now that can be the first exercise you try, and then once you've come up with quite a few different sketches for that, then take a look at how you could also just use those initial letters and combine them with pictorial elements, almost like we did in that very first exercise where we brought elements in and combined them with the whole word. Now when you're sketching out symbol-based logos, you need to start thinking about how the text would actually work with the symbol. And I'm going to show you a few common ways of doing that you can bear in mind. So the first you can see here, we've got a centered icon with centered text beneath it, and then if there's any subtext, say for example a strap line, that will often be set a bit smaller and underneath that centered as well. And the second option here, you can see the icon is set either to the left or the right of the text, and quite often it's actually lined up top and bottom. In the third option here, you can see again that the icon is set either to the left or the right of the logo, but it's more at a diagonal angle, and the logo icon is often a lot smaller. And in the last option here, it's actually called a roundel. It's less often used, but it's used when you've got a kind of rounded icon shape. Another thing we can try is just using the first letter of the business name. So in this case we'll take the C. Again, look back to the mind map, look on the mood board, take some of those ideas you've got there, and how can you combine them in some way or use a C to portray one of those ideas. So perhaps we somehow combine the idea of arrows with a C. Maybe because we've got pie charts, that sort of thing there, maybe the C could form some sort of pie chart, whether it be part of a pie chart with a bit cut out, whether it be a sort of three-dimensional looking pie chart. Maybe the C could be the sweep of a chart going upwards. As you can see, there's lots of different things you could try. So have a bit of experiment, see how many different sketched ideas you can come up with for that too. Geometric shapes are used quite extensively in logo design, and you can see it in some really well-known logos, such as Orange, HSBC, and the BBC. Now they all use geometric shapes almost exclusively with the typography, but there are others such as Firefox and Vodafone, and they both use geometric shapes, but they use it combined with a symbol. So you can try doing the same thing. So for example, at first, try just using those geometric shapes and see by almost using them almost exclusively what sort of ideas you can come up with. So for example, I came up with here the idea of little cubes making a graph. And I also came up with the idea of using a circle, a triangle and a cube, plus a few extra little bits, to make sort of an iconic version of a man improving. You could also create some new symbols where you're enclosing them somehow in a geometric shape, or you can even look back at some of the old symbols that you've already done and to see if they would work better somehow enclosed or using a geometric shape. So try a few of those out and see how you get on. So just for a quick recap, you should now have a series of sketches, and you should have tried adding elements to the words of the company name, creating symbols and recognisable elements, using the initials of the company name, using the first letter of the company name, and using geometric shapes. Now you should have a whole stack of sketches, and what I usually do is go through, and any that I think have potential I circle them with a highlighter or a red pen, and then you can take another piece of layout pad and condense them all together, trace over them, tidy them up a little bit, and then you can either scan them in, or if you haven't got a scanner, use a phone and save them as a JPEG or a TIFF, and that we'll be able to use and bring into Illustrator to trace over. Now in this section we're going to take the mind map that's been created, the mood board, and also the digital imagery that was collected, and see how we can combine those with the words of the company name to create a logo. Now one way we can do this is look at the elements, and one of the most basic things that we've got there is a step, which was something that Brian mentioned in the initial brief. So think about how the step could be used and combined with the words of the company name. So one way we might do that is to create little blocky steps here, and you can see that's actually been influenced by these steps here on the mood board. Or if we take a look here on the imagery, we've got this like little checkerboard square paper type effect. Now maybe that could influence some block type steps here where the little square becomes the dot of the eye. So going back to the mind map, one of the other things that we had on there was chart. So we also had lots of reference for charts on the mood boards. So think about how you can combine the idea of a chart with the words of the company name. So one way you could perhaps do that would just be to simply use the dot of the eye to become part of a flowchart. Perhaps the chart, the actual flow of a chart, could go through the whole of the three words. Perhaps the eye could become a little tiny pie chart. As you can see, the sketches don't have to be brilliant, mine aren't. They're purely to work out your ideas. Looking back at the mind map, I had the word mountain, and it started making me think of climbing and climbers, and I wondered if I could do something with a climbing wall. So I went and had to look for some reference because I don't really know what they look like. So the easiest way to do that is just go on to Google, go to Google Images, just by clicking images up here, search climbing wall, and you'll get a load of reference. And I just download, like you did before at the beginning when you were looking for sort of reference images, just download any images that you think will help you. And so I worked out that I could probably use the dot of the eye again to make a little sort of climbing wall. It looks a bit like a juggler actually, but it was another option. And just like I said with the mind map, don't censor yourself when you're doing your sketching. It doesn't matter if it's something that's not appropriate at this stage, because you're going to narrow them down. So the more options you've got, the more options you've got to narrow down, and then you can hone them in as you go. Now, another thing that Brian mentioned in his brief was the possibility of maybe using arrows to show improvement. And I thought that just by simply amending the T a little bit on continuous can make that into an upwards arrow. So what I suggest now is that you take all your ideas from your mood boards, your mind maps, and anything else you can think of along the way, and see how many different options you can come up with by using little elements of those and combining them with the words of the company name. Now, before we go any further with working up the logo in Illustrator, let's have a quick look at fonts. So I've got a page open here in Illustrator, and I'm just going to type in a word. So I'm going to type in font, and I've already put it in Arial, but you can swap the font here to whatever you've got on your machine. And then probably the simplest thing is we can change the weight of that font. And you've probably done this before, so you could have regular, bold, bold italic, or normal italic. Now, depending what your font you choose, you might have other different weights. So if I look, for example, in my fonts, I've got Helvetica Neue here. I've got loads of different weights. I've got really thin, light, ultra light, I think that one's called. So yeah, there's also condensed versions of the typeface, so it will all depend what typeface you're using. But let's go back to Arial regular for now. So one of the things we need to decide with our logo design is if we're going to use a serif or a sans serif font. So if I just copy this here, and I'll make this Times. Okay, you can see that Times has these little tiny, I don't know what you'd call them, sort of twiddly bits. They're actually called serifs. So that is called a serif typeface. Whereas there's nothing on this one, Arial, so that's a sans serif typeface. Often people now use sans serifs, I'd say, a lot more predominantly because it's modern, but no doubt things will change again. Serifs are often better if you want to do a lot of type. So, for example, things like newspapers will tend to use a serif face, as you can pack more in and it's supposed to be more readable when you have large chunks of text. Now, we should also take a look at spacing, which is also known as tracking, and kerning to see what differences they can make to a word. Now, spacing is basically when you apply extra space between each of the letters on your word, but it will be applied across all of the letters. So if we take a look here on this Illustrator panel, this is where you apply the tracking. So I'm going to put in 200 just there, and you can see how extra space is applied between each letter. You can often see this done on things like perfume packaging, or when someone wants to make something look expensive, you quite often put extra tracking. Let's put that back to normal. Okay, back to naught. Now, another thing we can do is, say for example, I don't like the space just between two letters. It's like the relationship between the O and the N. Well, that would be kerning. And what we'd do is go over to here, and this is where you set the kerning in Illustrator. So I'm going to apply, say, -30. And you can see how that tightens up the space between the O and the N. Another thing we should take a quick look at is leading. And leading is the space between lines of text. And we can alter that in Illustrator on this little panel here. And I can just take that down with a little arrow, or I can type in. So I can increase that by typing in there, or using the arrows to increase it as well. So you've probably already got quite a decent selection of fonts on your computer, but if you wanted more variety, there are a couple of good sites that you could take a look at, and these both offer a selection of fonts that you can use for commercial use. And the first is dafont.com. That's spelled DAFONT.com. I'll just quickly show how to use it. They've done something really nice, which is split the fonts down into different characteristics. So let's say we were looking for a sans serif font. We can simply click just there. Let's move this down a little bit. And you can type in a bit of text that you want to use as a preview. So you'd probably use one of the words from your company name. So let me try and write in continue. Oh, I've already got it coming up there. Continuous. You can choose how many fonts per page. So let me go 20. Size medium, that's just the size we're going to preview it at. And I always click on more options because if I'm going to use something commercially, I want to make sure it's just available as a public domain or a free font. Obviously, if you're just using this for experimenting, you can use any of the fonts. But if you're going to use it for a live job, choose public domain or free. So we'll click on that and just hit submit. And it will come up with a lot of different options. And obviously using the Word, which is great because you can get an idea of how your logo is going to look. So just scroll through them, and any that you think are kind of along the lines that you're looking for, when we come onto the logo project, you just simply hit download and download them to a folder on your machine. If you're not sure how to install them, I think in the help section you can find something on how to do that. So another of the sites we can look at is, I can't remember the actual address, but it's Font Squirrel. Let's try that. Okay, there we go. Font Squirrel. And again, all the fonts on here, they're all free for commercial use. And again, they've split them by style, which is really nice. So again, if we click sans serif, it'll give you a load of different options. And again, you can just look through those, see if anything looks like it would be suitable for the job you're doing. Some of them you can download directly from the site. Some of them you have to go through to third-party sites, and you might have to create a login, etc. on those. So yeah, I'll try and stick with these fonts so that we're all on the same page if we're trying to design a logo so you can follow along. In this section, we're going to take a look at using the basics of Adobe Illustrator. It's not going to be a full course, but it will be enough to get you up and running and designing your own logos. If you do want more in-depth information on using Illustrator, there are courses on Udemy, and you can also find free videos at tv.adobe.com/product/illustrator. So one of the first things we're going to take a look at is these two tools here at the top, and I'll refer to them as a filled in arrow and an open arrow, but they're actually called selection tool and a direct selection tool. So let's start off by just drawing a square on the page, a black square. And as you can see, if I select this selection tool, I can literally just move that about. There's not a lot else I can do. Even if I could try and click the sides, just get the same thing. I can scale it, but not a lot else. So now let's try this direct selection tool. Now what I can do here is I can grab parts of it and move it around. Just undo that. I can grab a single point at the edge. But if I grab it at the centre, it works just like the other tool. Now let's try adding another square. Just make that another colour just so we can see the difference between the two. Now I'm going to group them together. So if I just select both by holding the shift and go Object, Group. Now you can see if I go on the selection tool again, both those objects move around together. So if I now go on Direct Selection tool, you can see I can just pick up one of the objects. Let's go back to the selection tool, but you can see they're still grouped. And you can do exactly the same thing before, so you can also grab points like that, just single point. I could grab more than one point, but if we go back to the selection tool, they're still grouped. So the next thing we're going to do is have a look at the pen tool, and we can use it literally just by clicking on the page to create straight lines. Another thing we can do if we either want vertical or horizontal lines is just hold down the shift key. Now holding down the shift key will also give us the option of making 45-degree angles. Okay. We can also make curves with the pen tool. So this time you click down, then click, but instead of letting go, hold on and drag a curve. Do the same thing again. Click, hold, and drag a curve. Click, drag, click, drag. And we'll go back to the end point. Now, say I wish I had an extra point in here. It wasn't quite the shape I was looking for. I could just go into the pen tool here, Go add anchor point. I'll do it again. Another one there. Oh, perhaps that's not quite where I want it, so I might remove that one. So I just go to delete anchor point and then click just there. And if I go back to the direct selection tool, I can also alter these curves. So just select the point that you want to adjust, then grab one of these pivot points. As you can see, you can just change where that curve falls. Now if you wanted to, you could also go to this convert anchor point tool. Now this lets you grab one of these anchor points without the other side, so I can literally do that. You can see the other one staying still. Or you could also decide that you don't want that to be a curve anymore. Click on it and it becomes a straight line. Now let's have a look at the text tool. So if I just click on the little T icon there, I can literally start typing. And then literally if I put my cursor down there, hold down and drag, I've now selected that. You can see at the top here I've got a font menu. So I can just choose any font that I've got on my system there. And you can also pull in a character menu. So instead of grabbing your font from up there, we can go to Window, Type, Character. And we can do just the same thing with this. So here you've got options for your type size and your kerning and your spacing, as I showed you before. We can also make type run around a path. So we just draw a path first. Let's get rid of the fill. Okay, and if we go then down to type on a path tool, so just click with that onto the path, and as you can see that's now following that path. So if I select that by just holding down and dragging, there we go, type on a path, we've got some options here. So at the moment that's called rainbow text. If we go skew, which basically means it all slants, so it's sort of on a vertical, go 3D ribbon. Not quite sure where you'd use that, but type stair step, which basically puts everything almost like it was on a little step of its own. I'm not quite sure what you'd use the last one for either. The line tool works pretty much as you'd expect. Select it here and literally you can just drag lines wherever you want. And again, if you hold down the shift key, you can either do vertical or horizontal lines or 45-degree angles. Now let's get rid of those. And we've got shapes tools here. So this is a square. Obviously if you hold down the shift it's a square. If you don't hold down the shift it could be a rectangle of any dimension. But underneath the square there are other options. So you've got a rounded rectangle tool. And say you didn't want the corners to be quite that round. If you hold down your Option or Alt key and click on the artboard, you can then change that. So I'll make that a 5. And obviously you can see the difference there. It's not as rounded as this option. So let's delete these for a minute and take a look at some of the other options. So I've got an ellipse tool. So if you hold down the shift you get a circle. If I hold down either the Option or an Alt and the shift, you get a circle, but it starts from the center point, and that's really useful. Let's delete that. If you don't hold down the shift key, you can create ellipses of all different sizes and proportions. We've also got a polygon tool. So if you hold down the Option or Alt key and press on the artboard, you can see you can choose how many sides you want the polygon to have. So if I go 8, I get a octagon. If I go down on 3, I'm going to get a triangle. And we've also got a star tool, and again if you hold down either the Option or the Alt key, you get to choose the 2 radiuses. So if you think about a star and the outside points of your star, they're on the outer radius, and where the inner points hit, that's like the inner radius. So let's try. So we'll do an outer radius of 20 millimeters, inner radius of 10, and we'll make it a 5-point star, but obviously you can do as many points as you want. Okay, so let's just try another one of those. So let's try putting in 20 points this time, and we'll make the radiuses a lot more sort of similar. So let's go for 16. Again, you can see the difference there. So now let's take a look at the brush tool. And if you just hold down and drag, you can create a brush stroke. There are loads of different options for these. So if we go to Window, Brushes, where's Brushes? There's our brushes. But obviously we haven't got many options in there, but if you go on this side bit here, we go Open Brush Library, and you can see you've got loads to choose from. So I'm going to go for artistic ones. Let's go for charcoal pencil. So I could pick one of these here. So I'm on the brush again, pick that charcoal, and you can see the sort of effects you can get. And you can alter most of these. So you see, as you use them, they come into this palette here. So now I could actually go in and edit this. And so I could change the width. You can see it changing below there. And if you were using a pen, a Wacom tablet or something like that, you could also change so it varied depending on the amount of pressure you were putting on the tool. The pencil tool is fairly similar to the brush tool. You can just literally draw on the page, and you can also use the settings, same brush settings that you use, so you can pick any of these again. Let's go back to something fairly basic. There's also quite a neat little tool called a smooth tool in here. So say that's not a particularly smooth curve, I could run this tool over there and try and create a better curve. You basically have to just fiddle around with it until you're happy with it. You can see it sort of smoothing out my curve there. Let's try it on this bit as well. So you just gradually get a better curve. And there's also a path eraser tool, which literally just deletes your path. Now let's have a look at some of the tools that let you rotate and scale objects. So we'll start just by drawing a square, and then here's the rotate tool. I think that's fairly self-explanatory, but just grab one of the corners and you can rotate that into any position that you want. Okay, I'll get it back to normal. And then here we've got a scale tool. So you can just drag a corner. If you hold down the shift key, it keeps it in proportion, so it makes it stay as a square. So if I let go of the shift key, you can see I can scale it, but I can scale it in any which way. Now the free transform tool does pretty much the same thing. I can scale it like this, holding the shift key. I can scale it without, but it also lets me rotate as well just by grabbing the sides. So that just makes things a little bit quicker really. Now underneath the rotate and the scale tool, we've got a few more tools hidden, so let's take a look. So here we've got the reflect tool, and what this does is create a mirror image of the shape. So I'm going to choose a point I want it to be reflected on, and I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key, press down. You can see I get the option then to choose whether it's reflected vertically or horizontally or an angle of my choice. So I'm going to go to vertical and go copy. Now this is going to obviously create a copied version, a mirrored image, but if you didn't press that copy, basically it would just move the one that's already there. Okay. And then underneath the scale tool, we've got the shear tool. I think it would be easier if I create a plain square again that's not tilted. So if we grab the shear tool, you can just double click, which you can do with most of these tools, and you get a panel where you choose what degrees you want to put in there, or you can do it manually. So I can just click down the bottom here and then drag this in any angle. I'll just show you again on the numerical panel. So say I pick 45 degrees, it would sort of shear, it would tilt to 45 degrees. Now we're going to take a look at the dropper tool. As you can see, I've already created a red square. So what I'm going to do now is draw a circle, and it's a black circle, but imagine if I wanted that circle to be red, and I really wanted it to be the same red as this square. I just take the dropper tool, press on the square, and it copies the colour over. Then you can also copy over type styles. So if I write hello just here, let me just blow it up a bit so you can see it a bit better. And we're going to put that in times. Copy that. Let's write goodbye here. I'm going to make that a different font, so I'm going to make that Helvetica. But say then I've changed my mind and really I'd like it to be the exactly same size. So hang on, to make it easier, let me blow that up a bit in size. So really I would like this to be in this style, so it'd be in times and this size. So I'm going to take the dropper tool, just click on there, and as you can see it's literally copied both the style and the size. Another thing we need to take a look at is this fill and stroke palette. So let's draw a circle to start. I'm going to fill that with, let me fill that with magenta. Okay, at the moment though you can see here it's got a black stroke. I don't really want it to have a black stroke, so I can just delete there. But then say I change my mind and I would rather it had a magenta stroke but no fill. I can just switch that there. Then I decided I wanted that to be yellow. I just select the fill, go down to the colours, I drag that to make it yellow. As you can see it's very easy, just switch between the two and to delete strokes where you don't want them, or delete fills where you don't want them. Now let's take a look at the Pathfinder palette. Now this is really useful for creating logo designs. If we go to Window, Pathfinder, and a little palette comes up here. As you can see I've got two shapes ready. So what I'm going to do is put one next to the other. And imagine if we wanted all these three bits to be separate. We could do that using the divide. So click on that, and then we need to ungroup them. So we go to Object, Ungroup. And as you can see, we've now got three separate elements that we could use. So let's undo that and try something else. Okay, so let's put that over top of here again. Imagine I wanted that square removing, so I wanted to minus the front from the back. So let's go minus front. As you can see, the square has now been extracted from the circle. See what else we can do. Let's put the two together again, and I can merge them. So now that's one object. And we can also do a crop. You can see you've got the bit that intersected between the two of them. Play around with a few of the other selections and see the sort of effects you can get. Another really useful tool is the Align tool. So we find that by going to Window, Align. So what I'm going to do is select these three shapes. And then imagine I want to align them on a baseline. I just click the one here. You can see they now fall to a line just at the bottom. I can do the same at the top and the same with lining up the middles. And we can also do the same vertically. So align left, align right, and align them on a centre line. It also lets you distribute objects. I'm going to show you that by doing some same size squares. I think it will illustrate it a bit better. So I'm going to put these all at different distances. First of all, I'm going to align them on a centre line. But then, imagine I want these equally spaced out. So I'm going to select all four and then hit the distribute objects. And you can see they're now equally spaced. We do the same horizontally. So first of all, I'm going to align them. It doesn't really matter how, so I'm going to align them centered. And then I'm going to do a distribute horizontally. And you can see they're equally spaced again. Now let's take a look at the layers palette. You can access that if you haven't got it open already by going to Window and Layers. And as you can see, I've got three rectangles, each of which are in a separate layer. So the red's on the bottom, yellow in the middle, and blue on the top. This means if I grab the blue, you can see it falls over the top of the other two. But I can easily change that order. So if I wanted the blue to be at the bottom, I'd just drag it and move that to the bottom. What I can also do is lock certain layers. So if I wanted that yellow box, that layer with the yellow rectangle in, not to be able to move, I can just put the lock on it just like that. So now if I try and select that, I can't. I can select the blue, I can select the red, but I can't select the yellow. I can also hide layers, just to make things easier if you're working on quite a complicated job, by turning on and off. So I'm turning the red rectangle layer off like that. If you want to create a new layer, just get this little triangle here, go to new layer. So we're going to call this green. And I'm going to create another rectangle there and just colour it up green. And you can delete layers in much the same way. Another thing that's important is to regularly save your work. So if you haven't saved already, go to File, Save As, leave it on the Adobe Illustrator AI setting, call it whatever you like, hit save. If you're sending the job out to somebody who hasn't got such a high version of Illustrator as you can obviously choose one of these, but for now leave it on the CS5. You could also save if you wanted as an EPS, so go File, Save As, instead of the AI choose the EPS version. And I leave it a transparent background. So now you should have a basic understanding of Illustrator, and we'll be covering more bits as we go along and work up the logo designs. So we've gone through working up a few logos, and hopefully you've worked up a few more on your own, and you should now have quite a good selection of logos in black and white. You can see here these are the ones I've done. So now the best thing to do is narrow these down again and pick your favourites and work those up in colour. I'm going to go into a bit more about colour in the next video. So now we've got our rough logo sketches scanned in, we're going to have a go at working a few of them up. So start by opening up a new document in Illustrator. So you do that by going up here and go to File, New. We want it to be for print, because I think it's easiest to work them up, logo up for print first, and then we can convert it for the web afterwards. We'll go to A4, and everything else is set up as we want it. CMYK 300 DPI, that's all fine. So go OK. And then we're going to place in one of those logo scans, or if you used a photo, that's fine as well. So go File, Place, and then look for your folder where you've stored the file, and then just click on the file, and then down the bottom here you want to click on Template, and then go to Place. Okay, and then we're going to look at our layers. So we're going to go to Layers palette, Window, Layers. And you can see how it's brought that template in just here, and obviously it's knocked back a little bit, so it's at about 50% strength, so we can trace over it easier. And you can toggle on and off the visibility of that, which is really useful as we're going along. And it's also automatically created as a new layer that we can start working in. So I'm just going to blow this up a little bit, move that over. And let's start by just typing out the word. I'll make sure I spell that right. Okay, and to scale that up, you can simply hold down your Shift key and drag the corner. Okay, and then what you can do is go into Darfont, one of the sites I showed you before, or Font Squirrel, and you can see if there's any fonts that you think will work well for this. So I've done that already, and I've collected together a few, put them in a folder on my machine. So try a few out, and we can do that by going, if we go to Window, Type, and then Character. That brings us up a little palette here that we can test out different fonts. Put that to the side a minute. So let's try a few out. Okay, let's try one. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually copy the font a few times. You can do that just by hitting your Alt or your Option key and dragging. So let's try a few. Let's try another one. and try another one here. And obviously you can try this out with loads of different fonts. Okay, and I'm quite liking this one at the bottom because it's got a little bit of sort of slight quirkiness about it. So I'm going to go with that one for now. So I'm going to delete the other two. Obviously you can spend a bit of time experimenting with that. I'm just going to scale this down a little bit, and instead of doing it, I showed you that way before where you could do shift and drag, but you can also use the numerical panel here, so I can just go try 32 instead, and that's actually not bad. You can probably remember before how we talked about the spacing and kerning, so we need to look at this now and see if we need to actually alter anything. I think it'd be much easier if we turn the template off for that. So you just do that like I showed you before in here. And looking at it, it's not too bad overall. But I think I'll just take a little bit of space out here and there. So I'm going to adjust the kerning between the U and the O. So I'm just going to try minus 30. And try the same between the O and the U there. So try minus 30 again. See if I need any more tweaks. Might just do a little bit, maybe minus 10 between the C and the O. Maybe a little bit between the U and the S. Let's try minus 20 there. Okay, you can keep tweaking and get it until you're happy with it. Maybe minus 10 there. Okay, that's not too bad. I'm going to put the template back on just by clicking the icon again there. So I think that's getting there. So what we do now is obviously we need to create this arrow. In order to do that, we really need all this text to be editable so we can get rid of the T. So you can change this text into shapes, and we can do that by going up here, go to type, go to create outlines. And as you can see now, you couldn't actually edit that text because these are now made up of all little dots joining them. So I'm going to delete the T, but then I want to be able to line this arrow up with the top and the bottom of the letters. So to do that, we can use some rulers. So if you go to View at the top here, go to Rulers, Show Rulers, and then what we can do is drag these down. So I'll drag down one just the top of the letters there, and drag this one down to the bottom, and then we'll start creating the arrow. Now we're going to use the pen tool for that, and simply click down there and hold your shift, and that basically makes sure it's completely vertical. And press the button again, press the pen down again. And then at the moment that's a fill, it's a very, very small fill, so we're going to switch that so it becomes a stroke. But as you can see at the moment, that's not really thick enough. Let's go back onto the dark arrow. That's not really thick enough for what we want. So you can alter the thickness of the stroke either using the panel at the top here. So let me just show you. Okay, let's go back to normal. Or you go into the window, there's another little palette here. So let's try 5 point. That's probably a little bit too thick. Or it's not too bad because that's quite similar to the eye next to it. And then of course we need to make this the arrow piece. So I'd probably do that there's different ways you can do it. You can just use a pen tool, but I'd probably do it by drawing a square. Then if you go to this tool here, this allows you to pick separate points. Rather than picking the whole object, I can just select this one point here. So I'll do that, and then we're going to rotate it round. So let's select it again with this one, because obviously this moves the whole of the shape. Go on to Rotate tool. If you hold down your Shift key, that will let you rotate in 45 degrees, keep the segments of 45 degrees. So we'll do that, and then we'll grab hold of it again with the arrow. Okay, it's a little bit too wide. So what I'd do then is go to the open arrow again, which just allows us to do the separate points. Click on one of the points here, And then on your keyboard, do little arrows on your keyboard that you'd use if you were playing a game, almost like a joystick. I'd click the one that sends it sort of inwards. So maybe I'll do that two of those, and then do exactly the same the other side. Select that point again with the open arrow. 1, 2. Let's try that. So let's go on that with the filled in arrow to move the whole thing. Okay, that's not bad at all. I'm just going to turn the template off again for a minute so we can have a look. As you can see, it's not really lining up that well. So I'm going to select the top piece and this piece, and we're going to do some aligning on that. Now you've got the option to use the alignment tools at the top, or if we go into Window, we've got an alignment palette. So most things in Illustrator, you've got more than one way of doing things. So obviously you can do exactly the same thing down here. And then let's select both of these bits again. So we can do that by holding down the Shift key. And then I'm just going to move it over, again using the arrow keys. Just try and get a little bit more even. And I think I'm going to need to move that down to level it off. So let's try moving that down a little bit more. Need to work out whether we do want it to poke over the top or not. Now I'm still not quite sure about this arrowhead, so I think I'm going to try making it a little bit smaller and see if it looks better. So I'm going to do that by using the open arrow tool, selecting one of the points, and I'm going to go up to with the the keyboard arrows, which is what you'd use if you were playing a game on the computer. So hit the arrows twice upwards and once in. And I'm going to do exactly the same with the other side. Select that one point, up arrows, and then in once. And I think that looks a lot better. So we're going to go with that for now. Now I want to pull in the second word of the logo. So let's put the template on again just so we can see. And I want it to level up with both sides of continuous. So we'll pull some rulers in, just as we did before. There's one the other side already, so that's fine. Let's move that over a little bit. And then type in the word improvement. Network. Now, obviously you need to choose a font for this, and I'd be tempted to stick with a variation of weight on what we've used here. So Perspective Sans, that was Perspective Sans bold. So I'd perhaps go for a regular here that's already come up. You can use different fonts, but make sure it's sufficiently different if you are going to go with that. So you might, for example, use a sans serif here and a serif face below it if you were going to try that, just to give it a bit of contrast. But if you're going to stick with something similar, stick with the same family typeface. So let's put that there. And obviously we need to check to see if the kerning and the spacing looks okay. So I think there's a few bits that need adjusting here. Definitely around the O here, so I'm going to take a little bit out of there. So let's try minus 30, maybe a little bit more still, minus 40, even a little bit more, minus 50, and the same here, minus 30, maybe. Let's start with that. I might even take a bit out between the P and the R. Minus 20. Let's have a look. Okay, here again between the W and the O, let's go minus 30 and minus 40. Okay, maybe a little bit between the O and the R. Okay, now I think that could be tweaked a bit more, but I'll leave you to experiment on yours. And then obviously I need to make it reach this line here, so I can do that just by grabbing the arrow like we did before, grabbing the corner point and holding down the Shift key, or you could use the type measurement here. Let's just check if that's in about the right place. Yeah, that's not too bad at all. Let's take the template off again. As you can see, that's sort of getting there now, I think. We could add in the strapline if we wanted, but for now we'll leave that. Before you were going to do anything with the logo, if you were going to send it off anyway, you'd want to change this to outlines, just in case the person on the other side hasn't got the font that you've used. But if you wanted to change a copy, you could always duplicate it here, keep that as proper text, and then go type create outlines, just in case you want to come back and tweak it a bit more. So let's get rid of that for now. Okay, so I think we're about there. Now I tend to leave all the logos in black and white until I've worked up a few, and only then do I start having a look at potential colours. I think the problem is if you start working on colours at this stage, you get a bit blinded by whether you actually like the logo because of the shapes of a logo, or whether you like it because of the colours you've used. So stick to black and white, at least for the starting point, until we've got a few options together. So let's have a go at putting together another one of our logos. And I've already got a new document open up in Illustrator, and just do that same as before, File, New Document. And then I'm going to place the image again. So File, Place, look for the image, click on Template and Place. And then if you need to open the Layers palette, you go Window, Layers. Okay, I'm just going to blow that up a little bit so we can see it a bit better. Let's move, just move it up a second. Okay, and then we're going to start trying to trace off this image. We've already got a new layer open, ready to work in. So for the head, I'd just do a circle, and to get it so it starts in the centre there, I hold down on a Mac, Alt Shift, and then use the circle tool. On a PC, I think it's Command Shift and drag. So that's the circle. Now to create this piece, I'll use the pen tool. Click on the pen tool. I'll start with a point just outside of the square, and then you go up here, and to create a curve you just drag. So I'll drag out that curve and then click on the end point, and then come over here and do the same again, just drag. That creates a nice curve. I hit the same point and then join the two together. Okay, and then we're going to use the pen tool again for this bit down here. So start just outside the square, and then go up and give that a bit of a curve, and do the same thing again. I'm just going to drag that and then go back over the same point, straight down. Now I have a problem here, because it's set to fill, I can't actually see what's going on. So where it's fill there, if we click this little symbol with the red diagonal, that gives it no fill. So go back to the same point, click here, and we want to drag out another curve. This is slightly different, so what I'd probably do here is go sort of the middle of the leg, and then I'll come up here, and each time I'm just pulling. So pull the middle there again, and back down here, and then go back to the original starting point. Now I might look at that and I might not be completely happy with the way that's looking. Maybe I want to tidy that up a little bit. So if I go onto the open arrow tool, I can easily start coming in here and moving these points around. So you just click on one point and drag. And I could also see these little end points here. I can move them around. Obviously we don't want that like that, but let me move. Let's just grab it again. Move that and move the point just to tidy it up. Okay, and you can spend a bit more time than me just getting that to look right. Then I need to create the arrow up here, but I don't want it to look too rigid, so I think I'm going to use the pen tool again. So I'm going to go up here and just create 3 points. But if you did want to create a triangle, a proper triangle, you could come up here, and underneath the circle, if you hold down, you can see you've got a polygon tool. And if I press the Alt or Option key, depending on PC or Mac, and then click down on the pasteboard, I get something come up here with little options. And obviously for a triangle I want 3 sides. This is how wide it's going to be. And don't worry too much about that because we can scale it afterwards. So there's my triangle. And what I could do then is use this tool which scales things. And I could, if I just wanted to scale one dimension, I use those center points like that. And if I want to scale the whole thing, I hold down the Shift key and drag a corner like that. But I'm going to use the slightly irregular triangle we've got up here, so I'm going to delete that. Okay, now what I need to do is create this square that goes around the outside. I'm going to literally just use the square tool, hold down the Shift because that'll give you a square rather than a rectangle, and try and work that out. Okay. Right, now I need to create these bits here. For now I just want to keep them black and white. So I want to make sure this square here, if I change that to a fill, that square is obviously in front of the rest. Just put that back for a minute. So I want that to be behind because I want all these bits to show up. So you've got that square here, and we got Object, Arrange, Center Back. Now obviously you can see these things are coming in front of the square there. So at the moment this shape here has got both a fill of white and a stroke of black. We only want it to have a fill. So click on the stroke and then click that red diagonal little square there. Do exactly the same thing with the rest. So stroke, we want no stroke. Again with a triangle. The triangle hasn't got a fill. So to give it a fill and a stroke, we can click this little thing here, then get rid of that stroke again. Same thing with the little body bit at the bottom here. We want to give that a fill and a stroke to start, and then we'll get rid of the stroke. Okay, now we take the square. At the moment the square just has a black stroke, so we're going to switch that so it's just got a black fill. Now if we take the template off there, you have to see that a little bit better. And you might want to just adjust where the square's falling. There, until you're happy with it. Just play around a little bit with that. And obviously you can still go back in and edit points and stuff if you want to tidy that up a little bit. So now what I want to do is, obviously when we've got a nice finished piece, we don't really want these little bits hanging over the edge. So I'm going to select these bits here, all the bits where they sort of join each other or overlap. And then we go up here to Window, got to Pathfinder Palette. And what we can do now is go Divide. This section, this little thing here is Divide, which basically is going to cut that up into sections. Don't worry about the head, we'll get that back. So I can now delete these. And now if I grab the whole thing again, if I go Object, Arrange, Center Back, we've got the head back again. So we've got the icon all drawn up, and now we need to add some type to it. So let's start by typing in the company name. Continuous. Oops. Now I've typed that in 3 lines, but you can obviously experiment with that, see if it looks better in 2, 1. I think 1 would probably be too long, but maybe into 2. And then there's too much space between these letters, so we can alter that just by selecting all, which you can either drag or go Command and A, and then we just alter the leading by doing this, or you can actually type in if you want. So let's try that for now. I'm going to bring in some rulers, just top and bottom on the icon. I'm going to place it up there, and just to scale it I'm going to do the same as I did before, where I drag the corner, hold the Shift and drag that out. Now I quite like that typeface. It's actually Alt Harz Grotesque, which is one of the ones I found on the Darfont, but we could test out some other options. So let's just try. Make it a bit smaller just so I can see it all at once. So let's try one. Let's just try another one. Oops. And you can obviously try out a lot more than me because you've got more time. So I like the original one we've got there, so I'm going to delete these. I think the leading might still need to be tweaked a little bit, so let's just do that slightly. Get that lined up. Okay, now I'm feeling like this has got too much spacing between letters, so I want to tighten it up a bit, but I want to do it as a whole. So we'll use the spacing option in Illustrator. I'll just put a -20 on that. And then I might just need to go in and tweak. So I think these now look too tight, the T and the I. So let's just add a positive number there. So let's add a 20. That's looking a bit better. And I might just take a little bit of space out between the O and the V. So I'm going to do a -20 there. Now you can obviously take a lot more time and tweak it a lot more. So I don't think that's looking too bad. But what we can do is, obviously that's only one option, but maybe we want to try a few different variations. If you remember, we looked at some common sort of logo and type positioning. Perhaps we'll try a few of those. So let's just duplicate that up, and you can do that by going on the main arrow, dragging an area around it, holding the Shift key. Now hold down the Alt or the Option key and drag, and that just makes you another copy. But what I'm going to try now is reducing this icon. So do the same thing, let's select just that icon, and if you go onto this will let you scale it. So I'm going to make that a lot smaller, and I'm going to try doing this typography in 2 lines. But obviously those two will have to come down a bit more because I think that looks a bit uncomfortable. So let's try making that 20. That's too small. Try 25. I'm going to try making it a lighter weight, so let's try the regular version. That's not looking too bad. And then we need to alter the leading. And obviously you can tweak the spacing and the kerning on that word as well. Let's give it slightly more leading. And if you can remember when we were looking at those different logo positionings, one of the things there was to position at a slight diagonal. So we'll just try that. It's not too bad. Maybe slightly smaller. Oops. Losing his head. You can group them together if you want to make sure it keeps it. You just go to Object and Group. Okay. Oops, I've still missed the arrow. Object and Group. There we go. Okay, so that's not looking too bad. And I'm going to copy that one. So do the same thing, hold down your Shift key, drag, and now hold down the Alt or the Option key. Just drag that along, it creates another one. And we could just try sitting that the other side. Get rid of that one. Now I've got just 2 lines of text. Maybe I just want to level that up with the top and the bottom again. So try another variation of that. Or actually you could go this side, that'd make it slightly different. So let's try that. Okay, and get rid of the guides so you can just see it a bit better. So you just go View, Guides, Hide Guides. Okay, that's our second option. Okay, so let's have a go at working up another logo. I've got a new document already open in Illustrator, and then I'm going to place the sketched image in there. So go look for the folder, and that's the image I want. Click on Template down the bottom here and Place. Now if we go and open up our Layers folder, go into Window, Layers, templates there. Let me just move that up a bit so we can see it a bit more. and just blow it up a little bit as well. Okay, that's a bit better. Okay, we've got a layer ready to start with there. So we need to decide the best way to create this logo symbol here. And there are a few ways you could do it. I mean, you could try and look for a type that is very similar to this, but that's probably going to take you quite a while. You could try drawing it with a pen, and I'm just going to quickly show you that, just so you have other logo designs that are a little bit more complicated, just so you know how to use the pen properly. So just have a go at doing part of this with a pen. So I'd click on a point, and then I'd go to another point and pull in a curve, and do exactly the same thing. Pull a curve, and again pull it round, and let's go for the middle there. Whoops, that's probably not very good. Undo that. I'm going to go right to the end instead. And then when you want to make a straight line, just click on exactly the same point. Okay, so we'll go around here and pull. Pulling gives you the curve. Okay, you don't need to worry at this stage if it's not that accurate, because we can adjust those points just how I showed you before. So basically you're putting a point down and you're pulling it again, and then we want this bit to be straight, so I'm going to click on the same point and go back to the end point. As you can see, it's not particularly tidy, but you could go into, let me just have a look, go into the little open arrow tool, and we could start moving these points around to try and get it to be tidy. But you can see doing something like this is actually going to take quite a lot of time, and it's going to be incredibly difficult to try and get that to be accurate. So in this case, I'll delete that and start using some shapes that we can break up. So I'm going to use the ellipse tool, and to get it to start from the center point, you hold down the Alt or the Option key, and then I don't want it to be a circle, I want it to be slightly off a circle, so I'm not going to hold the Shift key in this case. I'm just going to pull and try and get that the circle to be in the center of what we've drawn there. Okay, I don't want a fill, I just want a stroke, so I'm going to delete the fill there. Okay, that's not too bad. I'm just going to move it down a little bit. Now we don't really want this full ellipse, so what we're going to do is cut it. We can do that with the scissor tool, and that's actually hidden underneath the eraser tool. So if we just put a couple of points like that, and then if I go to the open arrow tool, select that little piece and delete it, and then we've got the kind of the shape we want. Might have to just tweak and move that around a little bit. Now then we want that stroke obviously to be a lot thicker, so we go into Window and Stroke, got the stroke palette up, and then we can experiment with the width of that. So I don't actually know if I want it quite as thick as I've drawn it, so I think I might leave it at that for now, and we can always come back and edit that later. So now we need to create this N shape down here. And we could probably use an ellipse tool, but I think I'm going to try the rounded corner rectangle for that, which you can find just over here. And you can alter the settings for this by clicking either the Option on a Mac or the Alt, I think, on a PC. Double click, and you can change the corner radius, and I'm going to go for something fairly high. Let's try 30. I'll just delete that because I want to draw it where I want it. And then to make, obviously I want this to kind of be the center point just here, so I'm going to hold down the Option, say, or Alt key there, and I'm going to try pulling that out to create the N. Okay, let's try that for now. Might be a little bit too wide. So I'm going to pull in some rulers. So if we just go View, Rulers, Show Rulers, and then just let's try lining this up a little bit. No, it's not too bad. It's not far off. It's obviously slightly out from our sketch, but that's fine. So let's go with that for now. And then obviously I don't want the bottom section here, so I'm gonna do the same thing as we did before, but this time I'm going to need to put a ruler there so I know exactly where I'm cutting. Let's try there. So get the scissors tool again, click there and the other side, and you can see we've left with this bit that we can just hit delete. Oh, hit delete again. Okay, so let's just take a look at that. Let's get in there. So now we also need to create the dot just here. So we're going to use the ellipse tool to do that again. So got the ellipse tool, hold down Option or Alt, and then pull out your circle. Oh, and it's on stroke at the moment, so you want to switch that so it becomes the fill. Okay, perhaps make that a little bit smaller. Let's have a look without the template on. I'm not that sure about that. I think it's jarring a little bit with the bit below it. So what I think I'm going to do is try making that a square instead, so the dot is a square. I'm going to get rid of that. Let's put the template back on a minute. Let's try using the square tool. I'm going to pull in another ruler just to try and get a level from there. See how that looks. Okay. Now I think that's looking better, but I think we need that to be parallel with the square here. So we can do that. What we're going to do is make this into a shape rather than a stroke. At the moment that's just a thick stroke. So you can go Object, Path, Outline Stroke. And we can now try and level that up a bit. I'm going to just zoom in there. Okay, and what I'm going to do there is adding an extra point. So there's a plus, little pen with a plus there. I'm going to click, oops, just click just on there. I'll keep missing it there. Let me blow it up a little bit more. Okay. That's it, managed to get it that time. And then I'm going to delete this one at the top. I'm just going to move that down a touch. And then to stop this curving up here, I can just use this little Convert Anchor Point tool. Okay, now we're up close. I can straighten that up a little bit as well. Okay, let's have a look at that. I think that's looking better. You could probably play around a little bit and work out where that looks best. Now I'm going to convert the bottom end to an outline as well. So if we go back to the arrow, select that in, and we go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke again. I'm going to colour one of these up a different colour, so not a different colour, a different tint. So let's go for a 50% up there. 50%. Now what we're going to do is try and break these two shapes up so we can make it look like they're interlinking with each other. So we're going to select both of them, and if we go to Window, Pathfinder, we'll see little different options here. And this one is basically Divide, which splits all those overlapping shapes. So I'm going to hit that. Okay, just to show you what happened here. Basically, all these bits are now separate. So if we wanted to make that look like that's going over, that's fine at the moment. But then of course we want this bit really to be the grey colour, because we want it to be looking like it's going under. So we can do that by simply sampling the colour from there. That's using the dropper tool. And then we might want to join all those pieces together. So those three pieces there, we can just go over to here and go Merge. Okay, and we're going to join, do exactly the same thing with these three pieces. We're going to go to Merge. That's missed off the other bit. Let's try it again. merge. That's it. Now we can think about putting a square or a rectangle around that. So I'm going to just zoom down just a little bit. I'm going to put the template back on. I think it needs to come in a little bit closer than I've drawn it there. So let's have a go at this. The only trouble is, see, we've got this now covering it, and we could do what we did before and go arrange centre back. But what I'm going to do is put this on another layer. So if I go over to here to the layers palette, go new layer, layer 3. You can name them obviously. I'm going to move. You see this little dot in the corner here? I'm going to move. Let me get back on the box. I'm going to move that up, and then I want this box to be at the bottom. So I'm just going to drag that to the bottom. I'm going to remove the template again. Now obviously you can see I've got a bit of a problem here because the background is black and also my N is black. So I'm going to select the N and I'm going to colour it in white. I've got my colour palette here, so I can just literally drag this down for that to become white. So let's just hide those guides so we get a better look. You can do that by going to View, Guides, Hide Guides, and let's save the file because I think that's getting there now. So go File, Save As, and I want it to be Illustrator GPS. I'll put CIN logo. That's fine. Illustrator. I'm using Illustrator CS5, yeah, that's fine. Transparent, you can obviously save that down if you're using a different version. Transparent, okay. Okay, then we can start looking at the typography. So let's just zoom down on this a little bit, zoom out. We can start working with some type. Now you could do an extra layer for this if you wanted. So basically we could lock those bits in place so that if I try to move that, nothing now. And let's move this over. Okay, on our new layer, type in continuous improvement. Let's work. Whoops. And then do the same as you did before. Have a look under font and font squirrel and try out a few different typefaces. So I'm just going to get my type palette out. Let's have a look. I think I found one I liked. So let's try this. I quite like that. Okay, it's leaded out too much, so we're going to take a bit of the leading away. You might even pick the bolder font, might look better. Let's try it and see what we think. I don't like the spacing on this. I think it's way too spaced out. So I'm going to overall take some out here. Let's try that. I think you go more than that even. I'm going to try -50. That's getting a bit better. Might even take a bit more out. -60. And then you can go into individual letters, and I'll just do a few. So take a bit of kerning, that's probably too much. Between here. So I actually add a little bit there. So I'm going to go +20 there. I'll let you fiddle around a little bit more with that. I think I'm going to need to make this icon smaller, so I'm going to have to unlock it. So you just do that by taking away the little padlock keys here. So I'm going to grab the whole thing. I'm going to hold down my shift key and go like that. And I'm going to just reduce that down. Go on the scale tool, reduce that down a little bit, maybe slightly bigger. And let's move this type back over. And I'm going to lock those two layers back down again. Now I'm going to just reduce that type by grabbing the corner. I'm going to pull in some rulers. I can't see our guides. View, guides, show guides. That's it, we can see the rulers now. And there's another one already down at the bottom there. Let's play around with the lead in there. Okay, maybe tweak that up a little bit. Let's move the guide so we can just have a look. I think that might need to be tightened up a little bit more. Maybe. Let's try that. Let's just scale it up a little bit again. I'll leave you to play around with that a little bit more. And then I'm going to try adding in the strap line to this one. So let's pull in some rulers. I might put one in here. We don't necessarily need one on the right, but maybe I'll pull it out of the way. So the strap line was crowd sourced continuous improvement. I'm going to stick with the same typeface but go for a regular weight, I think. Take that up a little bit. I probably don't want it spaced out quite so much, so let's take a little bit of that off. A bit more still. Okay, and just scale that down. Take a look at that without the guides on. So view guides, hide guides. And that's not bad. I might actually try putting a dividing line in there. So let's put the guides back on a second. And just try drawing a line. So I'm using the pen tool. Just put a dot there. Hold down your shift key to make sure the line is horizontal. And just there. Obviously at the moment it's a fill, so I want a stroke. Let's just look at the stroke palette, and then you can play around with different weights of line. I'm going to move the guides a minute, so let's just hide the guides. So you can play around, see if a heavy one, that's probably too much. But that's not too bad, it's probably getting there. Kerning's bothering me now, just going to have to go in and tweak that a little bit. But I'll let you do that some more. So I think that's getting there. If you're creating a logo that's going to be used for print, you have a couple of options. You can either use Pantone colours or CMYK colours. Now Pantone colours are solid colours. They have a colour chart where you can literally specify a colour by its number. So for example, say you wanted to create a bright red and yellow logo. You could choose perhaps Pantone 123 yellow and Pantone 185 red. Or if you wanted a soft green and purple logo, you could choose 375 green and Pantone 2587 purple. So I'm just going to show you how to access the Pantone colours in Illustrator. You can do that by going to Window, Swatch Libraries, Colour Books, and I tend to use the Pantone Solid Coated down the bottom here. And you'll see this palette comes up. Now you have different options of how you view this palette. You can view it as small thumbnails, which just gives you swatches of different colour. If you hover over the top there, the number comes up, the Pantone number. But I tend to use either the small list view or the large list view. Now if I'm looking for a specific colour, I can actually just type it in if I know the number already. So say for example I'm looking for a green. I know there's a green called 347. So I type just in the numbers 347 and up comes the colour. And then obviously you can just draw anything you like and colour it up in the Pantone colour you want. Now if you're using CMYK colours, CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow and black. And what it means that every colour that you choose will basically be made up of those four colours. So if you wanted to make an orange, you'd have to make that up out of yellow and magenta. So you might, for example, make that of 50 magenta and 100 of yellow. And if you saw that orange printed and then blew it up under a magnifying glass, you'd see tiny dots of magenta and yellow like I've showed here. In Illustrator you can access the CMYK palette by going Window, Colour, and then you just switch here, click on this little arrow, click CMYK, and you can just move these sliders to whatever you want. So say for example I was looking for a nice bright red, I know that can be made out of 100 of yellow and 100 of cyan. And then obviously we can just fill in a box with that and change it. So if I just wanted magenta, that would change if I'm still selected. If I wanted a green, I could do 100 of cyan and 100 of yellow. And I'll let you play around with that a bit more. Now the other option is to create web-based logos. And these are using RGB, which stands for red, green and blue light, and all the colours we've made out of those three lights. So if you want to choose web colours, RGB colours, you can go to Window, Colour, just like we did before, and then just change this to RGB, and obviously you can move these sliders around. And the warning triangle will just come up if it's not a web safe colour. I don't think you need to worry about that so much anymore. But also you can access it from here, so you could change the colours. You can drag if you wanted to do it that way. You can do the same with the CMYK as well. And also, as you change the RGB colours, you'll get a hexadecimal, these colours are called down here. So you could actually specify a colour by putting in, if you knew the colour, things down here. So that would give us a pink. As you can see here, I've got together some of the logos where I've coloured them up. I've tried out a few different colours, but mainly stuck to the lime and the orange that Brian said he liked. So what you can do now is take the logos in turn, just copy them, and then paste them onto a page of their own each. So I would have one logo per page, or in this case I've got a logo on the reversed out version. And then if I just blow this up a little bit, you can see what I do at the bottom of the page is just put say option 1, option 2. So then if you're talking either via email or over Skype, it's much easier just to say, oh, I like option 2, or I don't like this about option 2. And you can create extra pages just by going to Window, Artboards. Obviously you can see I've got 6 already. You can just go to New Artboard. That'll give you an extra page. There is a huge amount of debate on how many logos you should present a client. It can go from anywhere from people saying you should present 1 or 2 ideas to people who present 10 or more. So I tend to go somewhere in the middle and usually present anywhere between 4 and 6 ideas. As you can see here, like I mentioned before, I've got each logo on a page. And the best thing to do is just save out these pages as a PDF, and it's much easier then to send that to a client because most people can open PDFs. So if we go File, Save As, go down to PDF, hit Save, and I'm just going to leave it on the default for now, and then hit Save as PDF. And that's ready then for emailing out. As you can see, I've got one of the black and white logos open, so I'm going to have a go at colouring it up. I'm going to use Pantone colours to start with. So if you go down from Window to Swatch Libraries, Colour Books, Pantone Solid Coated, and then we can start picking some colours. And I'm going to use the open arrow tool to just select the CON and then the rest of the word, and leaving the arrow out for now. I'm going to use an orange. So you can either type in an orange colour here, so I know 165 is orange, and that's not too bad, or I can scroll through and just look, see what I like. I also like this Pantone 021, so I'm going to pick that. And if we go to Window and Swatches, you'll see that that colour that you've just used now appears in the Swatches palette. So that makes it a lot easier to colour up other bits. So we're going to go to this tagline at the bottom here and colour that up the orange as well. Now that doesn't look too bad, but I think the black is a little bit harsh, so I might try making that a dark grey. So the easiest way to do that is probably we'll select that bit first, and then we can either just scroll through again looking for some greys, or I know there's some nice greys called cool grey, so you can literally type in the word cool or start typing a word cool and the Pantone cool greys come up. And I'm going to go for a dark one, so a cool grey 11. As you can see, that cool grey has now appeared in the swatch palettes as well, so I'm going to colour up the arrow in that as well. So again, on the open arrow, hold down your shift so you can select both bits at once, and then we want the stroke and pick that cool grey. So that's one colour option. Let's just zoom out a little bit and we can copy that then. So do a copy and the paste. You can either use your keyboard commands, or you can go edit, copy, edit, paste. Just move that down a little bit. Move that over. And another colour that Brian said he liked was a lime green. So I'm going to use the open arrow again, select these, and I'm also going to select a bit of text at the bottom and see if we can find a nice lime green. And again, if you knew the number you're looking for, you could type it in there, or you can just scroll through and see what you can find. That 376 looks quite nice. And as you can see, I've made a mistake there. I should have had this fill selected. So let's just switch those two round and then get rid of the orange fill by doing that. Now we could try some more colour options, or we could try maybe boxing this in and make it reversed out. So let's try that. We'll do copy and a paste again. I'm just going to move the strap line out of the way a little bit, and I'm going to box this top bit in. So I'm going to use a rectangle tool and just send that shape to back. So object, range, send to back. And of course at the moment you can't see the C and the O and the rest of the word as they're all in green as well. So we're going to use the open arrow and just select that all. Alright, and you can notice I've still got the box selected. So if I just select that again, it goes off. Okay, in the swatches you can see a white there. Just switch that so it's the fill rather than the stroke. And let's bring this in as well. Okay, so I've just enlarged that a bit to level it up more with the sides of the box. As you can see here, I've got another one of the logos I've coloured up. I just wanted to show you how easy it is to switch between colour types. So at the moment, this orange is a Pantone 166. But if I wanted to swap that to be made up of CMYK, I can literally just go like that. And then you can see that it's now made up of 64 magenta and 100 of yellow. Let's just put that back. So if I undo that, undo colour, I could also easily swap that to RGB. And you can see the breakdown of the RGB there too. So once you've got your logos together, you can always at the very end, if the client decides that they want them in CMYK or RGB, it's very easy to change them. Next comes the nerve-wracking bit where you email the logo designs over to the client, and I usually keep the email fairly simple, just something saying that here's some logos attached ready for your comments. And then basically it's a case of waiting, and hopefully in a few days you either chat with the client on the phone, by Skype, or they'll come back with some email comments on what you want to do next. There's a few possible outcomes you'll get. Either they'll love them, which obviously the ideal outcome, and there'll be just some very, very tiny amends to a chosen logo of their choice. Or you might get it that they like a couple of the logos and maybe they want something with a bit of this one, a bit of that one, combining a few different ideas. Or obviously they'll hate them, in which case if they hate them, and luckily it doesn't happen very often, but if they do, you really need to find out where either you've gone wrong, have you gone wrong and not taken a very good brief, or is it just that you're not on the same wavelength as a client and it's never going to work. So you really need to decide at that point, is it worth having another go, or is it best just to call it a day and say thank you very much, but I don't think it's going to work. But that's a worst case scenario, and like I said, it very rarely happens. In this video you're going to see me speaking to Brian on Skype and him giving me his feedback on the logos. Like I mentioned before, you can do this by email, by Skype, by phone. So take a look, but if you want to skip on, if you look at the notes, I've basically put a brief outline of what Brian talks about in this video. Hi Brian, you got the logos okay? You got the
Yeah,
logos through okay, sir?
I did receive the logos, and my word, fantastic. First glance, I love them all.
Oh,
This is
great.
the difficult part. Yeah.
So what do you think? What are you favouring, and what bits do you like of which ones?
Sure. So I think primarily from layout point of view, I like the designs that are going mainly horizontal, if you know what I mean,
Yeah,
because I'm thinking of using this logo, as a header, as a footer, and so the longitudinal kind of shape
yeah.
is kind of like the ones I like particularly. In terms of the I'm just giving general highlights here. So in terms
Okay.
of the colors, I think both the colors that I chosen are actually really cool colors that I like a
Yeah.
lot. The green and that or bright orange. I think both of them actually worked out the way
Yeah.
I hoped they would. So that's great.
Good.
Um, the blue, I wasn't really particularly a big fan of that. But
Okay.
if the same design was to be in green, for instance, I think it would
Yeah.
also look stunning.
Okay.
So I think those are just the general high level comments. I also liked the what you did with the CIN part of it, making that into kind of like a symbol or a logo on its own. I really like that because that's what's gonna make it stand out and memorable. So that one I particularly liked. Um, so yeah, those are my general comments right there. Really
Great.
loved it. That's the
Good.
word.
So do you know what sort of direction you want to go from here? Which you want me to work up a little bit more for you, or are there any one or two?
Yeah, so let's go from the top, okay?
Okay.
The first one, very simply, what I would like to see here, I like that design. I like that T with the, with the arrow pointing up.
Yep.
That it's very simple but very, very powerful. I'd like to see that in the orange that I
Okay.
used. Just as simple as that.
Yep.
And can you do a couple of things as well?
Yep.
Just changing the font
Mhm.
from the one that you've used there, and I'll tell you the one that I'd like to have a look at. So that
Okay.
one we call that number one, two, three, four, five. The font number five, which is your fifth image down.
Yeah, I messed up the number in there, didn't I? Okay,
No,
so
it
that's the
doesn't
one
matter.
with the little symbol with the
Exactly.
yeah.
The
Okay.
symbol of like a
Yeah.
man with the arrow pointing up.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd like to see that font
Yeah.
on the number one logo,
Yeah.
and so both in the green and then just again with the orange. I really
Okay.
like the simplicity of this one, and
So you say you like the font on option five. Do you
yes,
like the fact that it's in cap? Well, it's in caps anyway, isn't it? On the other one, so that's fine. I'm just
yeah,
looking. Yeah, just flicking back and forward.
That's actually a good point that you bring on. Maybe the reason why I like this is it's not in caps. Not sure.
The one with the little person is in
Yeah.
caps, though, isn't it? Make sure we're looking at the right one here.
Okay.
So
Can we share screens? Let me see. Let me see
okay,
if I can share my
that'd
screen
be
with you.
good.
Hold on. I used to be able to do this.
I put at the bottom option 4, option 5. I don't know if you can see on the bottom of those
Okay.
sheets.
So it's option 4.
Right. Okay, now I'm with you. I'm looking at the wrong one.
Yeah, no problem.
Option 4.
It was
Okay,
my
yeah, so that's
mistake.
lowercase. So maybe try a lowercase version as well. Yeah.
Yeah, just that one.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So I
great.
really like it.
Okay.
Another one that I really liked is option 3. Option 3, I like that. That's the one where I'm talking about the
Yep.
CIN. I love that. The only thing I would need here, Tara, is again to go with the longitudinal or the long aspect would be to bring that speech bubble
Yep.
down to the same line as continuous improvement, crowdsourced improvement, so
Okay.
that it takes up almost the same shape as you have on option 6. You see what you did with option 6 there,
Have a
where
look.
the
Yep. Yep.
symbol is on the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
like to see that.
Okay, I think in that case, that on that one might have to do a bit of tweaking of where the actual point comes from. Yeah.
True,
Yeah.
that's
Okay,
right.
that's fine.
But I think those actually
Yeah.
are the only tweaks, and they're not really something that I would say is a showstopper by any means. I can use most of these logos as they are, but I'd just like to see what that looks like,
No
if
problem.
that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll sort that out. If you give me a couple of days, and
no problem
yeah,
at all.
and
Yeah,
I'll email them
that's
over to you. So once you've done all the amends that the client asked for, get them all together on pages again and save them as PDFs. Now, I actually preferred the original version of the continuous improvement one, this one here. I actually preferred the capital letters, but the client preferred the new one. So his preferred option was the orange version of the one with the arrow here, the one I'm pointing to, but he did also still quite like the bubble version. So he asked me if I'd mind supplying both to him, which I did. So once the client's approval on the logo, the next thing to do is to create them a few different formats. So they'll be able to use a logo, for example, on print work, for web stuff, and I'm going to show you how to do that in the next video. So you can see here I've got open one of the logos that Brian liked. First thing we need to do is check that all the text is converted to outlines. Now this will stop any potential problems you might have with the client owning the same fonts that you do. So if we select all the text and then go type, create outlines, and then what we're going to do is try saving out to different formats. So we go file, export. Now down here you'll see a list of options you've got. So let's try first saving it out as a JPEG. I've already created a folder called versions, so I'm just going to call this logo JPEG. Hit export, and here you get the options. So we're going to leave it at maximum. We're going to change this to an RGB JPEG, but obviously you can choose either. And we're going to leave everything else as it is. Now that would have created a JPEG in that folder. So let's try again. So go file, export. So this time you might want to create a PNG. So we'll just go logo PNG, export, and we're going to go for a high res one. We'll leave the background as transparent, just go OK. Now we'll probably also want to save an AI file, which is a basic native Adobe Illustrator file, and that will be useful for doing any print work. So we'll go logo AI. You can see I've already got Adobe Illustrator there. Go save. Now this says Adobe CS5, which is the version I'm using at the moment, but if the person you'll send it to has got lower ones, you can see how you can save down the file here. Go OK. And we could also do save as an EPS as well, so if we go file, save as, EPS, and we'll leave the background as transparent, everything else is fine. And then when you've collected a few different versions together, you can email them over to the client. Obviously check to make sure there's anything specific that they need. So taking Brian's feedback into account, he liked this top logo and really liked the little arrow, but he wondered what it would look like using the typeface from this logo. So it's a little bit tricky because obviously this is lowercase whereas this was upper, and the T, the arrow T, probably looks more like an uppercase than lowercase, but we're going to give it a go. So first of all, we're going to delete this symbol here, and so use the open arrow and just select around that holding the shift key and delete it. And now let's copy the arrow. I'm going to hold down the shift key again using the full arrow, this one here, and grab that, and then I'm going to hold down the option key and drag to do a copy, but you can do a copy and paste if you want to. Now we need to put a bit more space in here. We need to get rid of the T and put some space in so we can replace it with the arrow. So we'll do that by going to Window, Type, Character. I'm going to get rid of that T and then select the space just by dragging. And at the moment that's -30. I'm going to try making that quite high. Let's try 100. I think maybe slightly more, maybe a bit more. Let's go 150. Okay, let's try that. But first I think I'm going to colour that up the right colours. So let's colour that green. So if we go to Window, Swatches, and you can see here the green's already appeared in the swatch palette, so we're going to select that. Let's make this bottom piece the grey, and oops, let's try and grab a strap line and make that the green. Okay, now let's try putting this arrow in. So I'm holding down shift, whoops, hold down shift, just drag, get hold of that arrow. And I think I need to blow this up a little bit so I can see what's going on. Just move the palettes out of the way. Okay, and I'll probably pull in some rulers. So let's grab some rulers from the top here. And one just here. Oops. Hold the arrow again. Now if you're having trouble that you keep on picking up the other lettering, just put the arrow on another layer, which you just do go into Window, Layers, and let's make a new layer. We'll call it Arrow. And you can see that anything you've got selected at the time makes a little red dot just here. So you can just drag that red dot up to there, and we can basically lock down everything else. So now you can see that if I go like that, I can't grab anything else. I can only grab the arrow. So let's move that. And it's a bit big at the moment, so let's just take that down in size. So we're going to use this transform tool, grab a corner. Perhaps want it to just stick out slightly over the other letters. Maybe move that over a little bit. You can always nudge it with the arrow keys on your keyboard. So let's take that down in size again, just so we can see what that looks like. I'm going to move that over. I'm going to select that again, just nudge it. Okay, so that might need a bit more tweaking, but I think that's something I'll let you fiddle with your own version, move it over a little bit and get it to balance. So another thing we need to do is try and see what this looks like in orange. Now you can obviously copy yours and paste and create another version, but I'm just going to colour this one up. So if we go to Window, Swatch Libraries, Colour Book, and let's go for Pantone Solid Coated. Now we're looking for a nice orange. I mean, the O2 one's quite nice, or let's just sweep over. I just realised we've got the lock still on these, so let's unlock those other layers, sweep there, and a 165 is quite a nice orange, so let's try that. And if you can see, it's now come up in your little swatch palette. And then we'll do the same on the strap line. Okay, so there's the orange version. Now this was the other logo that Brian likes, but he wanted to see what it would look like long and thin so he could bring it up bigger in a banner. So we're going to give it a go. So first of all I'm going to pull in some rulers, just the top and the bottom of the text. Let's have one there and one at the bottom of the strap line. And then I'm going to select this using the arrow, holding down the shift key. I'm just going to move it over and see if we need to adjust that bubble at all. Let's try that. Actually, I don't think I do. That actually lines up quite well. I thought I might have to alter the point, but I think it might be okay. Just tweak it a little bit. Could tweak this in slightly if we wanted, but I think I'm going to leave that. I think pretty much every graphic designer hates quoting for a job because you just never know what the client's expecting. You could send out a quote that you think is quite reasonable and they might come back thinking it's way too high, or the complete opposite can happen and you're sort of kicking yourself for not going in a bit higher. So the general rule and the way I do things is to work out roughly how long I think it's going to take me to do the logo design. It will vary slightly, but the more you do it, the more you'll get a feel for that. So let's say, for example, you might say that it's going to take you a day to come up with a set of ideas. Well, let's say, for example, you're going to charge £50 an hour, and that's 8 hours at £50 an hour, so that's £400. But then no doubt the client will come back with some tweaks, so you need to think, how long do you think those tweaks are going to take? So perhaps I'd allow another half day to a day for tweaks, depending on how much toing and froing I think there'll be. So that might be another £50 times 8 hours, so that would be another £400. And you also need to take into account then, are you doing this just by Skype, by email, or have you actually got to go out and meet the client? Because obviously if you're doing a lot of travelling, that's all going to rake up extra hours and extra expenses. Now when you're putting together the quote, you might also want to consider things like safeguarding yourself against crazy amount of amends. And you can do this just by putting a line saying that the quote you've given includes minor amends, or you could say this quote includes 3 sets of client amends. Now this doesn't mean that if they come back say with 4 sets of amends that you're necessarily going to charge them. It just gives you that option should things get a little bit crazy. But obviously if it is to get to that point, don't just charge them it. Before you do it, say, okay, I've done quite a lot of amends, unfortunately anything beyond this point is going to have to be an addition. Just make sure the client always knows up front what's happening. Another thing you might want to consider, depending how well you know the client, is whether to charge them an upfront deposit. Now some designers do this and it can be anywhere between sort of 20% and 50%. In general I don't do it, although I have been stung a couple of times, so fortunately not very often. But yeah, you can choose that as an option. I wanted to say a big thank you for taking my course. I really hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned a lot too. If you want to keep up to date with new courses I'm making and freebies that I'll be creating for you too, go over to my website at www.nobledesignschool.com/Udemy. Thanks again.